And Director Patel, maybe if the FBI spent less time investigating progressive women of color and more time investigating actual domestic terrorists, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's voice cut through the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room like a serrated knife. She was leaning forward in the witness chair, one finger jabbing toward the man seated 4 chairs down from Chairman Grassley. FBI Director Kash Patel sat motionless, a yellow legal pad in front of him, his pen resting beside a thick manila folder. "You know what the problem is?" AOC continued, not waiting for an answer. "The FBI has been weaponized. COINTELPRO, Martin Luther King, Muslim surveillance, Black Lives Matter. And now," she paused for emphasis, her voice rising, "members of Congress who dare to tell the truth about January 6th. Several Democratic senators nodded. The progressive media section in the gallery sat forward, phones already recording. "I was hunted that day, Director Patel. Hunted. I hid in my office, thinking I was going to die while your agency did nothing to stop it. And then, instead of investigating the insurrectionists who wanted me dead, you investigate me. You question my staff. You subpoena my donors." She sat back, arms crossed, chin up. The hypocrisy is absolutely breathtaking. Chairman Grassley cleared his throat. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez, I'm not finished, Mr. Chairman." AOC didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on Patel. "Director, I want to know. How many FBI agents are assigned to monitoring my social media versus monitoring Proud Boys forums? How many hours has your agency spent investigating me versus investigating white supremacist militias?" Patel looked up from his legal pad. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, would you like me to answer those questions?" "Oh, please," she waved her hand dismissively. "Let me guess. You're going to hide behind ongoing investigations or classified information. That's what you people always do when you don't want accountability." "Actually, ma'am, I was going to answer directly. I just wanted to make sure you were finished." AOC's eyes flashed. "I'm finished when I say I'm finished. Director, you work for the American people. You work for me. So yes, answer the question. Justify your agency's targeting of progressives." Patel set down his pen. The room had gone very quiet. "Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, according to FBI records, we have never opened an investigation into you personally, never questioned your staff, never subpoenaed your donors. So when you say we're targeting you, which specific FBI investigation are you referring to?" AOC blinked. "You're playing semantic games." "I'm asking for facts." Patel's tone remained even. "You made a serious allegation under oath about FBI misconduct. I'm simply asking you to support that allegation with evidence." "The House Ethics Committee is not the FBI, ma'am." The progressive staffers stopped typing. Even the friendly senators looked uncomfortable. Patel picked up the manila folder. "But since you're here, and since you've questioned the Bureau's credibility, its ethics, its priorities, I hope you won't mind if I ask you a few questions about your own record." AOC's jaw tightened. "This is inappropriate. You opened this door, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. You came to this hearing to question whether the FBI has the moral authority to investigate anyone. You've questioned our credibility, our fairness, our integrity." He opened the folder, documents, photographs, spreadsheets. "So I'm going to ask you about your credibility, your fairness, your integrity. And everything I'm going to ask is public record, your own words, your own actions, your own ethics violations." He looked directly at her. "Let's start with the Met Gala." AOC's face went pale. Senator Kennedy leaned into his microphone, a small smile playing at his lips. "Oh, this is going to be good." Patel pulled out the first document. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, on September 13, 2021, you attended the Met Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Is that correct? I attended to make a political statement. That's not what I asked. Did you attend? Yes or no? A long pause. Yes. And you wore a custom-designed dress by Aurora James with the words "Tax the Rich" on it, correct? Yes, to highlight. Just yes or no, please. Patel's voice remained polite but firm. You wore that dress. Yes. And the ticket to attend this event, the Met Gala, costs approximately $35,000 per person. Were you aware of that? AOC shifted in her seat. I was invited as a guest. Were you aware that tickets cost $35,000? Yes. Patel nodded slowly, making notes. So you attended an event that costs more than most Americans make in a year, wearing a custom-designed dress to lecture people about inequality. That was the point, to infiltrate spaces of wealth and you brought your boyfriend, now fiancé, Riley Roberts. Is that correct? He was my +1. So 2 tickets at $35,000 each, that's $70,000 total. Who paid for those tickets, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez? I didn't pay. The tickets were provided. Provided by whom? AOC looked at her lawyer. The lawyer whispered something. She turned back to Patel. The Metropolitan Museum provided them. So you accepted $70,000 worth of tickets as a gift from an institution that regularly lobbies Congress. Is that correct? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Patel leaned forward. Because the House Ethics Committee spent 3.5 years investigating this. They reviewed 12,000 pages of documents, and they concluded that you impermissibly accepted gifts in violation of House rules and federal law. Were they wrong? The room was absolutely silent. AOC opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I paid for everything eventually. Eventually? Patel picked up another document. Let's talk about that timing. Because according to the Ethics Committee report, you received professional hairstyling, makeup services, accessories, jewelry, and a custom dress. The total fair market value was estimated at over $40,000. Is that correct? I don't know the exact. The Ethics Committee does. $40,000 in services and goods. And when did you pay for them? AOC's hands gripped the edge of the witness table. You paid after the investigation started, didn't you? After vendors threatened legal action for non-payment? After the Office of Congressional Ethics referred the matter for investigation? That's when you finally paid, correct? I was always planning to pay. Then why didn't you? Patel's voice cut through her excuse. You attended the gala in September 2021. The investigation started in February 2022, 5 months later. You still hadn't paid. Why? AOC looked at the Democratic senators. None of them met her eyes. There were delays in calculating fair market value. You're a member of Congress, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. You make $174,000 a year. That puts you in the top 10% of American earners. Are you telling this committee you couldn't afford to pay $40,000 for 5 months? It wasn't about affording. Then what was it about? Patel pulled out a photograph. AOC at the Met Gala, posing in her dress, surrounded by celebrities and billionaires. Was it about getting to hobnob with Anna Wintour and the ultra-wealthy while wearing a dress that mocked them, knowing you'd gotten it all for free? That's not, because that's what it looks like from here. Patel set the photo down. It looks like you lecture working families about paying their fair share, about how the rich are greedy, about inequality. But when you get the chance to attend a $35,000 per ticket party, wear designer clothes for free, and rub elbows with billionaires, suddenly all those principles disappear. AOC's face flushed red. You're twisting. I'm reading from the Ethics Committee report, ma'am, written by your Democratic colleagues, not by Republicans, not by the FBI, by Democrats on the House Ethics Committee who reviewed 12,000 pages of evidence and concluded you violated House rules. He flipped to another page. In fact, even after you finally paid, after getting caught, the committee determined you still owed an additional $3,000 to properly reimburse at fair market value. Did you pay that? Silence. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, did you pay the additional $3,000 the Ethics Committee said you owed? Her lawyer leaned in, whispered urgently. AOC's lips pressed into a thin line. I'm working with the committee to resolve. So that's a no, Patel made a note. So 2 years after attending the Met Gala, after a 3-year investigation, after being found in violation of House ethics rules, you still haven't fully paid for the gifts you improperly accepted. He looked up at her. And you came here today to lecture the FBI about ethics and integrity. Is that right? The room erupted. Chairman Grassley's gavel came down hard, once, twice, 3 times. Order! We will have order! AOC was on her feet. This is character assassination. This is your ethics record, ma'am. Patel remained seated, calm. And I have more questions. He gathered the Met Gala documents and set them aside. He pulled out a new folder. But you're right about one thing. Let's move on. Let's talk about your economic policies. AOC straightened slightly. This was her territory. I'd be happy to discuss. Let's talk about Amazon. Her face fell. In 2018, Amazon selected New York City as one of 2 locations for its new headquarters. AQ2, they called it. The plan was to bring 25,000 jobs to Long Island City in Queens, your district. Do you remember this? Of course I remember. And what was the average salary for these jobs? They claimed, not what they claimed, what the actual plan stated. What was the average salary? AOC hesitated. Around $150,000. $150,000, Patel repeated. For 25,000 jobs. That's, let me do the math here, $3.75 billion in annual wages in your district for your constituents. Is my math correct? The deal was corporate welfare. That's not what I asked. Is my math correct? Yes. And Amazon was going to receive approximately $3 billion in tax incentives over 10 years, correct? Yes. Which is tax incentives, not cash, not a check. Tax incentives, meaning they would pay less in taxes on their profits. But they'd still be paying taxes. They'd still be creating 25,000 jobs. They'd still be generating economic activity, correct? It was a giveaway to, just answer the question, please. Would they still be creating jobs and paying taxes? Yes, but thank you. Patel pulled out a document. Now, the total economic impact study estimated that Amazon would generate approximately $27 billion in tax revenue over 25 years. 27 to exchange for $3 billion in incentives. That's a 9.1 return on investment. Were you aware of those numbers? AOC shifted in her seat. Those projections were inflated. Were they? The same consulting firm that did Amazon's projections also did the projections for Microsoft, Google, and Apple expansions. that all met or exceeded expectations. But you knew better? I represented the concerns of my community. Did you? Patel's voice sharpened. Because after Amazon pulled out of New York, after you celebrated killing the deal, I have some quotes here I'd like to read. He picked up a printout of tweets. This is from your Twitter account, November 2019. You wrote, and I quote, "Today was the day a group of dedicated everyday New Yorkers and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed, its worker exploitation, and the power of the richest man in the world." End quote. Is that accurate? Yes, I said that. You celebrated killing 25,000 jobs. They weren't good jobs. They paid $150,000 a year. Patel's voice rose for the first time. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, the median household income in your district is $54,000. You killed jobs that paid nearly triple what your constituents earn. And you celebrated it. AOC's face reddened. It was about more than jobs. Was it? Because I have another quote here. You said, again on Twitter, we were subsidizing it. We could invest that $3 billion elsewhere. Do you remember saying that? Yes. So you thought the $3 billion in tax incentives was actual money, money that could be spent elsewhere. Is that correct? AOC hesitated, sensing the trap. The principle, do you understand how tax incentives work, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez? Of course I do. Then explain it. Explain how New York was going to spend $3 billion in tax incentives if Amazon never came. Silence. You can't, can you? Because tax incentives aren't money sitting in a vault. They're reductions in future tax obligations. If Amazon doesn't come, if those jobs aren't created, if that economic activity doesn't happen, there's no $3 billion. There's nothing. Patel pulled out another document. In fact, after Amazon left, did New York invest $3 billion in Long Island City? That's not a fair yes or no. Did it happen? No. Because the money didn't exist. The tax base didn't exist. The jobs didn't exist. You killed the deal, and your constituents got nothing. He leaned forward. But let's talk about what they did lose, because 25,000 jobs at $150,000, that's $3.75 billion in annual wages, as we established. Over 10 years, that's $37.5 billion in wages that your constituents will never see, because you didn't understand basic economics. AOC tried to interrupt. The community didn't want, didn't they? Patel pulled out a poll. This is from a Quinnipiac poll conducted after Amazon pulled out. 57% of New York City voters said Amazon should come to New York. 56% of your own constituents supported the deal. You didn't represent your community. You represented your ideology. He wasn't finished. And here's the most interesting part. You opposed Amazon getting tax incentives. You called it corporate welfare. But let's talk about your Green New Deal. AOC perked up slightly. The Green New Deal is about, I've read it, all 14 pages. And do you know what it proposes? Massive government investment in private companies, subsidies for renewable energy corporations, tax incentives for electric vehicle manufacturers, government contracts for infrastructure companies. Patel spread out a series of documents. Tesla would get billions. General Electric would get billions. Google would get billions for smart grid technology, all paid for by taxpayers. All government picking winners and losers. That's the exact same thing as the Amazon deal, except on a much, much larger scale. He looked directly at her. So Amazon getting $3 billion in tax incentives to create 25,000 jobs is corporate welfare. But Tesla and Google getting tens of billions for your Green New Deal is what? Progressive? AOC's jaw clenched. That's different. How? Explain to me how it's different. Because the Green New Deal is about saving the planet, and Amazon was about creating jobs? Both are policy goals. Both involve government incentives for corporations. The only difference is you liked one and not the other. Patel gathered the Amazon and Green New Deal documents. Speaking of the Green New Deal and climate policy, let's talk about your own carbon footprint. AOC's eyes widened slightly. According to your campaign finance records, during your 2018 campaign, you spent approximately $29,000 on Uber and Lyft rides. Is that correct? I was traveling constantly. You spent $29,000 on ride-sharing services. How much did you spend on subway rides and public transportation? Silence. I'll help you. According to the same filings, you spent approximately $8,000 on public transportation. So you spent more than 3 times as much on private car services as you did on the subway. He looked up at her. Isn't the subway more environmentally friendly than cars? Yes, but isn't public transportation one of the solutions you advocate for in the Green New Deal? Yes. So you want working families to take the bus and subway, which you call essential climate solutions, but you personally spend 3 times as much on private car services? AOC's lawyer leaned in, whispered urgently. She shook her head at him. Director Patel, this is ridiculous. I was running for Congress. I had to get to events. I understand. You were busy. You had places to be. Taking the subway takes longer. It's less convenient. Sometimes you're carrying materials. Sometimes you're tiered. Patel paused. But don't working families have the same problems? Don't they have places to be? Aren't they tired after a long day? Don't they sometimes need to carry things? He leaned forward. The difference is, you expect them to sacrifice for the climate, to take slower transportation, to pay higher energy costs, to give up gas cars. But when it's your convenience on the line, suddenly those sacrifices aren't so appealing. AOC started to respond, but Patel held up a hand. One more thing on this. You drive a Tesla, correct? She hesitated. Yes. A Tesla Model 3? Yes. Starting price around $42,000. The average new car in America costs about $28,000. Your car costs 50% more than what most Americans can afford, but you want to ban gas cars, which are cheaper, and force working families to buy electric vehicles they can't afford. He set the documents down. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I'm starting to see a pattern. You advocate for policies that sound progressive, that claim to help working people, but when it comes to your own life, Met Gala's designer dresses, Tesla, private car services, you live very differently than the people you claim to represent. AOC's face reddened. That's a mischaracterization. Is it? Let's talk about January 6th, since you brought it up in your opening statement. The room tensed immediately. AOC sat up straighter. I stand by everything I said about that day. I'm sure you do. Let's review it. Patel opened the folder. Inside was a map of the Capitol complex. He set it on the table where the cameras could see it. This is the U.S. Capitol complex. The main Capitol building is here. The Dome, the House Chamber, the Senate Chamber. Is that correct? Yes. And these buildings surrounding it, Cannon, Longworth, Rayburn on the House side, Russell Dirksen, Hart on the Senate side, these are the office buildings where members of Congress have their offices. Correct? Correct. And your office is in the Cannon House office building. Is that right? AOC hesitated. She knew where this was going. Yes. The Cannon Building is approximately 2 blocks from the Capitol building. It's connected by underground tunnels, but It's a separate building, correct? It's part of the Capitol complex. It's a separate building, yes or no? Yes. On January 6, 2021, where were you when the Capitol building was breached? I was in my office, in the Cannon building. Yes. But so you were not in the Capitol building when rioters broke in? AOC's voice rose. The entire complex was under threat. I didn't ask about threats. I asked about location. Were you in the Capitol building? The building that was breached on January 6th? No, but thank you. Patel pulled out a transcript. Now, in an Instagram live video you posted on February 1st, 2021, you described your experience that day. You said, and I'm reading your exact words, "I thought I was going to die." I did think that. You said you had a very close encounter where you thought you would be killed. You described hiding in a bathroom. You said a man entered your office, banging on doors and shouting, "Where is she?" Is that all accurate? Yes. And you said this man was looking at you with a tremendous amount of anger and hostility, that he didn't identify himself, that you didn't know who he was, correct? That's what happened. And later in that video, you revealed this man was a Capitol police officer. Is that correct? Yes, but I didn't know that at the time. We'll get to that. Patel pulled out another document. This is a sworn statement from Capitol Police Officer Michael Rodriguez. He was the officer who came to your office on January 6th. Would you like to hear what he says happened? AOC's lawyer stood up. Mr. Chairman, I object to this line of questioning. Grassley's gavel came down. Director Patel is entitled to question the witness. She made serious allegations in her opening statement. He's entitled to examine those allegations. Sit down, counselor. The lawyer sat. Patel continued. Officer Rodriguez states that he was assigned to evacuate offices in the Cannon building after suspicious packages were found outside the DNC and RNC headquarters, both within blocks of Cannon. He states that he knocked on your door and announced Capitol Police multiple times. He states that when he entered, following evacuation protocol, you were not initially visible because you were in the bathroom. When you emerged, he immediately identified himself again, with his badge clearly visible. He instructed you to evacuate to a secure location. You complied. The entire interaction lasted approximately 90 seconds. Patel looked up from the document. He says there was no anger, no hostility, no shouting, "Where is she?" He was doing his job, evacuating members of Congress during an emergency. Does his account differ from yours? AOC's hands were shaking slightly. You perceived hostility that wasn't there. You perceived a threat that didn't exist. And then you went on Instagram and told millions of people that you thought this police officer, who was there to save your life, was going to kill you. I didn't know he was police. He announced himself multiple times, and he was in full uniform. But even if we accept your version, that somehow you didn't hear him or see his uniform, why didn't you correct the record later? After you found out he was Capitol Police, after you knew he was there to help you, why didn't you go back on Instagram and say, "I made a mistake. I was scared and confused, but the officer was actually helping me"? Why didn't you do that? Silence. Because the story of the scary officer was more useful than the truth, wasn't it? AOC's voice was barely audible. That's not... You used that story to claim you were hunted, traumatized, nearly killed. You leveraged it for political points. You attacked Republicans who questioned your account. You accused them of not believing survivors. Patel's voice hardened. And in that same Instagram video, you revealed that you're a survivor of sexual assault, which is serious, which is real, and which has nothing to do with a Capitol police officer evacuating your office during an emergency." AOC's eyes filled with tears. "I was explaining my trauma response. You were using past trauma to validate a false narrative about present events." Patel's voice was sharp. "And that's not just unfair to Officer Rodriguez. It's unfair to every legitimate survivor who watched you weaponize sexual assault to shield yourself from accountability." Senator Hirono interrupted. "Mr. Chairman, this is outrageous. This witness claimed she was hunted on January 6th, Patel responded before Grassley could speak. "She used that claim to question FBI credibility. I'm entitled to examine whether her claim is true." He turned back to AOC. "Were there rioters in the Cannon building?" "There were pipe bombs." "Were there rioters in the building? In your hallway?" "No." "Were there rioters anywhere near your office?" "The threat? Answer the question. Were there rioters near your office?" "No." "So you were not hunted. You were not in immediate danger from rioters. A police officer came to evacuate you and you hid in a bathroom because you didn't recognize him. Is that the truth?" AOC wiped at her eyes. "I was scared." "I'm sure you were. It was a scary day for everyone, but scared is not the same as hunted. Confused is not the same as endangered. And a Capitol police officer doing his job is not the same as an insurrectionist trying to kill you." Patel pulled out a series of tweets. "But you didn't just tell this story once. You repeated it. You embellished it. In interviews, you said you thought you were going to be raped. You said rioters were looking for you specifically. You compared your experience to sexual assault." He spread the printouts across the table. "And when Representative Nancy Mace, whose office is 2 doors down from yours, said that no insurrectionists came into your hallway, you attacked her. You called her a liar. You accused her of enabling violence against you. Do you remember that? She was minimizing. She was telling the truth. There were no rioters in your hallway. You admitted that 30 seconds ago. But when she said it, you called her a liar and accused her of putting you in danger." Patel leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I want to be very clear about something. January 6th was serious. 5 people died. 140 police officers were injured. The Capitol building was breached for the first time since 1814. It was a dark day for our democracy." His voice dropped. "But you weren't in that building. You weren't in danger from rioters. You were 2 blocks away, being evacuated by police who were protecting you. And instead of being grateful, instead of being honest, you turned it into a performance. You made it about you, your trauma, your fear, your near-death experience that never happened." AOC was openly crying now. Several Democratic senators looked away. "And then, you used that false narrative to attack anyone who questioned you. You wrapped yourself in victimhood. You made it about sexism and racism and people not believing women. But it had nothing to do with any of that. It had to do with you exaggerating what happened for political gain." Patel gathered the January 6th documents. "You came here today and said you were hunted. You said the FBI did nothing to stop it. But you weren't hunted. You were never in danger from rioters. The only person who came to your office was a cop trying to save you, and you turned him into a villain in your Instagram story." He looked at her. "So when you question the FBI's credibility, when you question whether we investigate the right people, when you question whether we can be trusted, I have to ask, can you be trusted? Can the American people trust a word you say after you lied about something this serious?" The room was silent except for AOC's quiet sobbing. Grassley finally spoke. "We'll take a 15-minute recess." His gavel came down. When the hearing reconvened, AOC had composed herself. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. She looked like she was preparing for war. Patel waited until everyone was seated before he spoke. "Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, let's talk about your lifestyle." She stiffened. "My personal life is not—" "When you call yourself a democratic socialist who fights for working families, it is." Patel opened a new folder. "You make $174,000 per year as a member of Congress, correct?" "That's the congressional salary." "Yes. That puts you in the top 10% of American earners. You make more than 90% of Americans. Is that fair to say?" "I suppose." "You also have a book deal. You've sold merchandise. You give paid speeches. Your total income is significantly higher than your congressional salary. Isn't that correct?" AOC's lawyer leaned in again. She waved him off. "I've had some additional income, yes. According to your most recent financial disclosure, you reported between $100,000 and $1 million in assets. You're a millionaire, or close to it. Is that accurate?" "I don't think my net worth is anyone's business." "You made it everyone's business when you wore a tax-the-rich dress to the Met Gala." Patel's voice was sharp. "You made it everyone's business when you call yourself working class. So let's examine your claim." He pulled out a photo. "This is your apartment building in Washington, D.C. Navy Yard neighborhood. Luxury building. Doorman. Rooftop terrace. Monthly rent estimated between $2,000 and $2,500. Is that where you live?" "I need a place to live while Congress is in session." "Of course you do. I'm not criticizing that. I'm simply establishing facts." He pulled out another photo. "And in New York, you have an apartment in the Bronx, Parkchester neighborhood. How much is your rent there?" "I don't see how." "Because you constantly refer to yourself as working class. You talk about struggling to afford rent in D.C. You present yourself as just barely getting by, like the constituents you represent, but you make $174,000. You have 2 apartments. You attend $35,000 to parties. That's not working class. That's upper middle class at minimum." AOC's face reddened. "I came from a working class background, past tense. You came from one, but you're not working class anymore. You're a wealthy member of Congress who lives a comfortable, privileged life while cosplaying as a bartender who can barely make ends meet." He pulled out more photos. "You drive a Tesla. You wear designer clothes. You vacation in luxury resorts. You attend exclusive events. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, except that you simultaneously lecture working families about their consumption, their carbon footprints, their privilege." Patel leaned forward. "Do you see the hypocrisy? You live a life of relative luxury while demanding that working families, people who make $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, sacrifice for your policy preferences. They should take the bus. They should pay higher energy costs. They should give up gas cars. They should pay more taxes. But you get to fly to climate conferences, drive a Tesla, and wear designer dresses to parties that cost more than they make in a year." "That's a mischaracterization." "Is it? Let's talk about your fiancée, Riley Roberts." AOC's eyes widened. "Riley has nothing to do with—" "Oh, but he does." Patel pulled out a series of forms. "These are travel disclosure forms you filed with the House Ethics Committee. They're required whenever you take trips that are paid for or subsidized by outside parties. Starting in January 2023, you began listing Riley Roberts as your spouse on these forms. Is that correct? AOC hesitated. Yes, but here's the interesting thing. On these forms, there's a very specific definition of spouse. Patel read from the form. It says, and I quote, someone to whom you are legally married, not partner, not fiancé, legally married. He looked up at her. Are you legally married to Riley Roberts? That's a semantic. It's a legal definition, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. The form is very clear. Spouse means legally married. So I'll ask again. Are you married to him? Her lawyer stood. Mr. Chairman, sit down. Grassley's voice was firm. The witness will answer the question. AOC looked cornered. We consider ourselves, yes or no. Are you legally married? Do you have a marriage certificate? No. Then why did you list him as your spouse on these forms? House ethics commonly recognizes long-term partners. No, they don't. Patel held up the form. Your spokesperson said that when you were called out on this, but it's not true. The House Ethics Committee definition of spouse is clear. Legally married. The Office of Congressional Ethics has a different definition that includes long-term partners, but these forms go to the House Ethics Committee, not OCE, and their definition requires legal marriage. He pulled out another document. And here's why it matters. Members of Congress are required to disclose the financial information of their spouses, income, assets, stock holdings, but they're not required to disclose that information for boyfriends, girlfriends, or fiancés. It's called the boyfriend loophole. Patel looked directly at her. So if Riley Roberts is your spouse, which would make your forms correct, then you're violating disclosure requirements by hiding his finances. If he's not your spouse, which would make your forms false, then you committed a potential ethics violation by misrepresenting your marital status. AOC said nothing. Let me help you understand why this matters. According to his LinkedIn profile, Riley Roberts works for a company called Homebinder. He also runs a consulting company called Riley UX. But you've never disclosed his income, never disclosed his assets, never disclosed whether he owns stock in companies you vote on legislation about. Patel spread out several forms. Either way, you've got a problem. And either way, you're hiding something. AOC's jaw clenched. This is a witch hunt. This is you checking a box that says spouse when you're not married. That's not a witch hunt. That's you following the rules that apply to everyone else. Patel gathered the forms. But let's talk about the broader pattern here. The Met Gala. You accepted tens of thousands in gifts and only paid after getting caught. Amazon. You killed jobs because you didn't understand economics. January 6th. You exaggerated what happened for political gain. And now we find out you've potentially misrepresented your marital status to avoid financial disclosure. He looked at the senators. At what point does this stop being innocent mistakes and start being a pattern of someone who believes the rules don't apply to her? Senator Kennedy spoke up. Director Patel, I think you've made your point. Do you have additional questions for the witness? Just one more area, Senator. Patel pulled out a final folder. I'd like to discuss Representative Ocasio-Cortez's actual legislative record. AOC sat up straighter. Maybe this was safer ground. It wasn't. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, you've been in Congress since January 2019. That's almost 7 years. How many bills that you sponsored have been signed into law? She hesitated. Legislative success isn't measured solely by how many. Just give me a number. 0. 0, Patel repeated. In 7 years, you haven't passed a single bill. Is that correct? The legislative process is complicated. Other members of your freshman class passed bills. Abigail Spanberger passed legislation on insider trading. Elissa Slotkin passed defense legislation. Katie Porter passed financial reform legislation. They were elected the same time as you, but they passed laws. You didn't. Why is that? I focus on transformative policy, like the Green New Deal. Patel pulled out a document. Let's talk about that. You introduced it with great fanfare in February 2019, press conferences, media coverage. You called it the most important legislation of our generation. And when it came up for a vote in the Senate, what happened? AOC said nothing. It failed, 0 votes in favor, 57 against. Not even your Democratic colleagues voted for it. Why? Republicans sabotaged. Democrats controlled the Senate. Your own party voted against it. Why? Because it was too bold, or because it was completely unrealistic? Patel opened the document. Let's review what the Green New Deal actually proposed. Eliminate all fossil fuels within 10 years. Retrofit every building in America. Guarantee jobs for everyone, including people unwilling to work. Ban air travel, get rid of cows, all within a decade. He looked up at her. The estimated cost was $93 trillion over 10 years. That's 6 times the entire U.S. GDP. Did you have a plan to pay for that? Modern monetary theory says, modern monetary theory is not accepted by mainstream economists. Even liberal economists said your plan was economically illiterate. Paul Krugman, a progressive, called it unworkable. So did Larry Summers. So did Jason Furman, who was Obama's top economic advisor. Patel leaned forward. You proposed legislation that had no chance of passing, no realistic funding mechanism, and no support from serious economists. But it got you tremendous attention. Thousands of media appearances, millions of social media followers, a national profile. He paused. Almost like that was the point. Not to pass legislation, not to help people, but to raise your profile. AOC's voice rose. I'm fighting for transformative change. You're performing for cameras. Patel's voice matched hers. You introduce bills you know won't pass. You give speeches that go viral. You pick fights on Twitter. You show up at protests with photographers. Everything you do is designed for maximum media attention and minimum actual results. He pulled out more documents. The concentration camps comment about border facilities. The crying photo op at the chain-link fence, which we later found out was in an empty parking lot. The dramatic present vote on Iron Dome funding, where you sobbed on the House floor. The Instagram videos where you cook in your kitchen and talk about policy. It's all performance. AOC was on her feet again. I connect with my constituents. You connect with your followers. There's a difference. Your constituents, the people who actually live in your district, they need jobs. They need safe neighborhoods. They need good schools. What have you delivered for them? You've fought in committee hearings that make good clips. You've fought on Twitter. But what have you actually done? What legislation have you passed? What funding have you secured? What problems have you solved? Silence. You killed 25,000 Amazon jobs. That's what you did. That's your legacy in your district. Prevented jobs, prevented investment, prevented opportunity. Patel gathered his documents. But let's talk about what happened to you politically, because it's revealing. When you first ran for Congress in 2018, you positioned yourself as an insurgent, a progressive who would primary establishment Democrats. You primaried Joe Crowley, the 4th-ranking Democrat in the House. You beat him. You said the Democratic Party needed to move left, needed new blood, needed people willing to challenge incumbents who weren't progressive enough. He pulled out recent news articles. But now you're telling progressives not to primary Hakeem Jeffries. You're defending the establishment. You're saying primary challenges are bad. What changed? AOC's eyes narrowed. That's different? How? How is it different? You primaried Crowley when he was headed toward leadership. Now, Schumer wants to primary Jeffries, who is leadership, and you say it's wrong. The only difference is that now you're part of the establishment. You used to attack. Patel leaned back in his chair. You've become exactly what you ran against. A politician more concerned with protecting your position than with principles. Someone who advocates for rules that don't apply to you. Someone who demands sacrifices from others that you won't make yourself. He looked at Chairman Grassley. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions, but I do have a recommendation. Grassley nodded. Proceed. Based on today's testimony, I recommend that the House Ethics Committee reopen its investigation into Representative Ocasio-Cortez's financial disclosures, specifically regarding her marital status and failure to disclose her partner's finances. I further recommend that the committee examine whether her delayed payments for Met Gala expenses constitute an ongoing ethics violation. He paused. And Mr. Chairman, I want to be clear. The FBI has never investigated Representative Ocasio-Cortez. We have no open cases involving her. We have not questioned her staff or subpoenaed her donors. Every allegation she made in her opening statement about FBI targeting was false. Patel looked directly at AOC one last time. But maybe we should have been investigating. Because based on what we've learned today, there's a pattern of behavior that warrants scrutiny. Accepting gifts, violating ethics rules, making false statements about January 6th, potentially filing false disclosure forms. His voice was cold. You came here to attack the FBI's credibility. You should have worried about your own. He closed his folders. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. The hearing room erupted. Reporters sprinted for the exits. Democratic senators huddled together, whispering urgently. Republican senators looked vindicated. AOC sat frozen in the witness chair, her face pale, her hands trembling. Her chief of staff approached and whispered in her ear. She shook her head. He whispered again, more urgently. Finally, she stood. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a closing statement. The witness's time has expired. Grassley's voice was firm. This hearing is adjourned. His gavel came down. AOC started to protest, but her lawyer grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit. Cameras followed her every step. Reporters shouted questions. Representative, did you lie about January 6th? Are you married to Riley Roberts? Will you pay back the Met Gala money? Do you regret killing the Amazon deal? She said nothing. Her head was down. Her signature confidence had evaporated. As she reached the door, one reporter's voice cut through the chaos. What happened to tax the rich, AOC? She kept walking. Behind her, Kash Patel calmly packed his documents into his briefcase. A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. Senator Kennedy caught his eye and nodded appreciatively. The FBI director nodded back. Some days, he thought, justice was simply a matter of asking the right questions and letting the answers speak for themselves. The C-SPAN clip hit 10 million views in 6 hours. By the end of the first day, it had been viewed 85 million times across all platforms. The most shared moment, Patel asking, "Were there rioters in your hallway?" followed by AOC's barely audible "No." The second most shared, "How many bills have you passed?" 0. The progressive media tried to frame it as an attack on a woman of color. MSNBC ran segments on weaponizing congressional hearings. The Young Turks called it character assassination, but even liberal commentators couldn't defend her. "Look, I'm progressive," said one CNN analyst, but she got destroyed. There's no other way to say it. She came in hot, made allegations she couldn't back up, and got systematically dismantled. The New York Times ran an editorial, AOC's credibility crisis. The Washington Post fact-checked her claims about FBI targeting. Zero evidence. Even The Atlantic, usually sympathetic to progressive politicians, published a devastating piece. The Performance Artist in Congress: How Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Mastered Media Without Mastering Legislation. Within 48 hours, 3 things happened. First, the House Ethics Committee announced it was reopening its investigation into AOC's financial disclosures, specifically the spouse-partner question and her Met Gala payments. Second, a primary challenger emerged. Her name was Maria Santos, a Bronx native, Iraq War veteran, former public school teacher. Her announcement video opened with footage of the Amazon HQ2 ceremony in Arlington, Virginia, the city that got the headquarters instead of New York. $25,000 jobs, Santos said in the video. $150,000 average salary. My neighbors could have had those jobs. Our community could have had that investment. But our representative chose ideology over opportunity, chose performance over progress, chose her brand over our borough. The video cut to Santos in her old teaching classroom. "I served my country in Iraq. I served my community in the classroom. And I'll serve my district in Congress, not by making viral videos, but by passing actual laws, not by attending parties, but by fighting for working families, not by performing for cameras, but by delivering results." The tagline appeared, "Maria Santos for Congress. Real service. Real results." Within a week, the video had 12 million views. Sanders refused to endorse AOC. So did Warren. Even AOC's squad colleagues were conspicuously silent. Third, AOC went dark on social media for 9 days, the longest she'd been silent since entering Congress. When she finally posted, it was a long statement about coordinated attacks by right-wing forces and misogynistic attempts to silence progressive women. She claimed Patel had ambushed her with misleading questions designed to create viral moments rather than seek truth. The response from her followers was mixed. Her die-hard fans rallied, but the comments section was full of people saying things like, "He quoted your ethics violations, your own party's investigation. You literally said on Instagram you thought you'd be killed. Now you're mad he asked about it? 0 bills passed in 7 years. That's a fact, not an attack. You killed Amazon jobs, and now you're the victim?" The New York Post ran a brutal headline, "AOC, 0 bills, 0 credibility, 0 chance." 6 weeks after the hearing, AOC's approval rating in her district had dropped to 42%, the lowest of her career. Maria Santos was polling at 38%, and she hadn't even officially declared yet. Progressive organizations that had once championed AOC began hedging their bets. Justice Democrats, the group that had recruited and funded her original campaign, issued a statement saying they were evaluating all options for the district. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which usually stayed out of primaries, leaked to Politico that they were concerned about the seat's vulnerability and were open to supporting challengers in non-competitive districts. Translation: AOC was on her own. 2 months after the hearing, AOC held a town hall in the Bronx. It was her first public appearance in the district since the hearing. The room was packed. Half the attendees were supporters, the other half were angry constituents with questions. "Why did you kill the Amazon jobs?" a man in a construction worker's vest asked. My son's an engineer. He could have worked there. Now he's in Texas. AOC started her usual explanation about corporate welfare and community input. The community supported it, the man shot back. 57% in the polls. You keep saying you represented us. You represented yourself. An older woman stood up. I watched that hearing. I watched you cry about January 6th, but you weren't even in the building. My son is Capitol Police. He saw what really happened. You disrespected every officer who protected you that day. Another person. You make $174,000 and you call yourself working class? My family makes $40,000. You're rich. You're exactly who you said you'd fight against. AOC tried to regain control, but the meeting devolved into shouting. She left early, rushed to her car by staffers. A teenager filmed it on his phone. The video went viral. The caption, AOC can't face her own constituents. 3 months after the hearing, Maria Santos officially announced her candidacy. The launch event was held at a union hall in Queens. Longshoremen, teachers, construction workers, nurses, all union members, all people who would have benefited from the Amazon jobs. Santos stood at a podium without notes. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a talented communicator. Nobody disputes that. She's great on Twitter, great on Instagram, great at getting attention. She paused. But Congress isn't about getting attention. It's about getting things done. And in 7 years, she's gotten nothing done. 0 bills passed. 0 funding secured. 0 problems solved. But she killed 25,000 jobs. That's her record. The crowd applauded. I'm not running because I want to be famous. I'm running because my community deserves better than a part-time legislator and full-time influencer. We deserve someone who shows up for us, not just for the cameras. Santos held up a list. In 7 years representing this district, AOC has held exactly 14 town halls. 14. I counted. That's twice a year. Meanwhile, she's done over 300 media appearances on national television. She set the list down. I'll make you a promise. If you elect me, I'll hold town halls every single month. I'll pass legislation, real legislation, not viral sound bites. I'll fight for jobs, not fight against them. And I'll represent this district, not my Twitter followers. The applause was thunderous. The next day, Santos announced her first major endorsement. The union representing Amazon warehouse workers in Staten Island. The same union that AOC had claimed to support when she killed the HQ2 deal. The union president's statement was devastating. We wanted those jobs. Our members wanted those jobs. AOC said she was protecting workers, but she was really just protecting her ideology. Maria Santos actually listens to workers instead of lecturing us. AOC's campaign tried to respond, but the damage was done. 6 months after the hearing, the Democratic primary was in full swing. Santos raised $2.1 million in the first quarter, more than AOC had raised in her first campaign. The money came from small donors, unions, and local business owners. Notably absent, the usual progressive PACs that had funded AOC's previous races. The polls showed Santos pulling ahead, 46% to AOC's 42%. AOC's allies tried to help. AOC held rallies with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, but even they seemed unenthusiastic. At one event, a reporter asked Sanders if he thought AOC had been effective in Congress. Bernie paused, a long pause, before saying, Alexandria has been an important voice for progressive values. Not effective, not accomplished, just a voice. The clip went viral. Everyone understood what it meant. Even Bernie was distancing himself. On primary night, the results came in quickly. By 9:00 p.m., it was over. Maria Santos, 54%. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 38%. Other candidates, 8%. Santos won by 16 points. AOC's concession speech was brief and bitter. Tonight, the forces of the establishment celebrated defeating a progressive voice. They used distortions, and coordinated attacks to silence someone who dared to challenge power. But the movement continues. The fight continues. And I will continue to fight for progressive values in whatever capacity I can. She didn't congratulate Santos. She didn't thank her supporters. She didn't take responsibility for any of her mistakes. She simply walked off the stage. 2 weeks later, Santos gave an interview to 60 Minutes. "Do you think the Patel hearing changed the race?" the interviewer asked. Santos smiled. "Director Patel didn't change anything. He just showed people what was already there." AOC had been performing for so long that people forgot to ask whether she was actually doing the job. He asked, she couldn't answer. Some say he was too aggressive, too personal. Everything he asked about was public record: her ethics violations, her exaggerations about January 6th, her legislative record. Those are all facts. If asking about facts is too aggressive, then we have a bigger problem than one member of Congress. The interviewer pressed, "But was it sexist? Was it racist?" Santos, a Latina woman herself, laughed. "That's the card she always plays. When you can't defend your record, claim you're being attacked for your identity. But I'm a woman. I'm Latina. I'm from the Bronx. And I didn't find anything Patel did to be sexist or racist. I found it to be accountability." She leaned forward. "Here's what I think happened. AOC got famous for being combative, for calling people out, for demanding accountability from others. And she got so comfortable in that role that she forgot she could be held accountable too. Patel reminded her. The voters reminded her. And now we're moving forward with someone who will actually do the job." 4 months after losing her primary, AOC announced she was leaving politics to focus on organizing and movement building outside of electoral politics. Translation: she was starting a progressive media company. Within weeks, she had a deal with a progressive digital network, a podcast, a YouTube channel, guest appearances on friendly shows. She was doing what she'd always been best at: performing, talking, building her brand. Just not in Congress. 1 year after the hearing, Kash Patel was asked about it in an interview with Fox News. "Do you have any regrets about how you questioned Representative Ocasio-Cortez?" Patel shook his head. "None. She came to that hearing to attack the FBI's credibility. She made serious allegations, false allegations, about our agency. I had every right to question her credibility in return." Some said you destroyed her political career. "I didn't destroy anything. I asked questions. She couldn't answer them. The voters made their decision based on her record, not my questions." He leaned back. "Here's what people forget. Accountability isn't an attack. Asking someone to defend their actions isn't persecution. And when someone makes their career about calling others out, they can't be surprised when they get called out themselves." The interviewer smiled. "Any final thoughts on AOC?" Patel considered for a moment. She was talented, great communicator, understood media, knew how to build a following. In a different era, she might have been successful. He paused. But she forgot something important. Eventually, people want results. They want their representatives to actually do things, to pass laws, to solve problems, to deliver for their districts. He looked directly at the camera. You can only perform for so long before people want to see the actual show. And when the curtain came up, there was nothing there. In the Bronx, Maria Santos was sworn in as the representative for New York's 14th Congressional District. In her first 6 months, she passed 2 bills into law. One provided funding for vocational training in underserved communities. The other streamlined small business permits to encourage local entrepreneurship. Neither bill made national news. Neither went viral on Twitter. Neither generated millions of views. But in her district, people noticed. At her first anniversary town hall, her 12th since taking office, a woman approached her. "Thank you," the woman said. "My son got into the vocational program you funded. He's training to be an electrician. He wouldn't have had that opportunity before." Santos smiled. "That's why we're here. Not for the cameras, for the results." As she left the town hall that night, a reporter asked her if she'd seen AOC's latest podcast episode, which was attacking her as an establishment sellout. Santos laughed. "I don't have time for podcasts. I'm too busy doing my job." She walked to her car, a used Honda Civic, not a Tesla, and drove home to her one-bedroom apartment in Queens. No cameras followed her. No one filmed her for Instagram. No one called her a rising star or the future of the party. But in her district, 23,412 people had jobs at the new Amazon facility that had eventually opened. Not HQ2, but a smaller logistics center that came after AOC left office. And that was enough.